I would like to perhaps begin the conversation, Stephanie, by knowing more about the concept and the ideas and the inspiration behind writing the book Inclusify.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think I'll start with the concept, I guess, is that essentially people have two basic and essential human needs, and that is to belong, to be loved, accepted, part of the group, valued. But then there's another need, which is to uniqueness, and that's to be recognized as for your unique identity that you bring. And I feel like organizations have done a good job of promoting belonging, but oftentimes that means that people need to change different aspects of their identity in order to belong, which isn't really inclusion, right? If you have to give up who you are in order to be accepted, then you're not truly accepted.
Yeah.
And so that's where the idea for Inclusify is, which is inclusion is really driven by uniqueness and belonging together. And the inspiration for doing the book is I work with a lot of companies on unconscious bias and helping companies create a more diverse workplace. And I started to see over time that many organizations were creating more diversity, but they weren't managing it well when diverse talent was brought into the organization. So, maybe conflict went up, there is higher turnover. They see, we have invested a lot in hiring this fantastic talent, and then people leave. And I think it really came down to this lack of inclusion. You can't just hire people and not create a space where people can be themselves. And so in starting to look into this, I found 100% of leaders really want to be inclusive. They really want to hear different perspectives and do a good job making people feel like part of the team. And they just don't always know how to do it. And so that was the inspiration for writing the book Inclusify, for well-intentioned leaders who just need a little bit of guidance to pivot their leadership.
That's amazing. And maybe, one thing that I feel it always, it's quite a challenge in the space of diversity, inclusion, equity, and for that matter, in every other space, is the definition of things, right? Because we normally don't have a common baseline, if you will, of what everything means. And I'm saying this because yesterday I was having a conversation with somebody who was telling me how important it was for her in her role as a CHRO to tell the leaders what diversity is and what diversity is not. Because for some of them, they had this misperception that to bring diverse talent to the organization, they needed to lower the level of quality of the talent that they needed to bring. And she was saying that's not what diversity is, because then you're implying that diverse talent is not capable as everybody else. So she needed to define what diversity is and what diversity was not. So, and I'm saying this because I would love for you to define what belonging means, because I think everybody has a different understanding about this concept and this word. So what's belonging?
I mean, to me, belonging is being accepted and valued for the talent that you bring. And then as a result, the feeling that you identify with the organization, like you're proud to work there, you feel like you're on the inside, like part of the team. I mean, I think it's like an emotional state, right? To feel that you are an important part of the team.
I think I love that definition. And what right now, because we're going through this coronavirus crisis, I have seen, I don't know if you would have the same perception, I have seen a shift towards people perhaps feeling that now they have more freedom, if you will, because now they are working from home. So they're working perhaps under their own conditions and reality, meaning, well, now yes, there's a lot of stuff going on at home. I know, kids and the pets and, family and whatnot, but perhaps there is this added, layer of freedom where people are now given the ability to work at the time that makes sense for them. Of course, they have to deliver their outputs and their outcomes and whatnot, but they are doing so with more freedom, if you will. Do you think that is conducive to increasing belonging?
Yeah, for sure. I do actually. I mean, I think this is right now, like it feels very challenging, but there's so many good parts of this experience. I mean, like recognizing the massive economic impact and there's so many lives that have been lost. But from a workplace perspective, I think the flexibility to work from home actually creates more gender equality, because we see everyone loves having flex time at work. And this as an HR expert, people love it. It improves productivity, it improves engagement, but we penalize women for doing it. And so even if women take the same amount of time off of out of the office as men, they're viewed more negatively for that, probably because people have this underlying assumption and unconscious bias that women are home watching their kids, and people don't think the same for men. So if everyone's home all the time, then I think that eliminates that bias that someone has chosen to work from home. But then I think there's something else, and I'll say this as I look at you. So I'm actually in my school office today because I wanted to make sure I had a really strong connection. So I went to school, which is funny, Enrique, because my computer didn't work then, but so I'm not at home. But normally I'm sitting at my house, and every once in a while a random cat walks in front of the screen. Sometimes my kids run in and Zoom bomb me. And I feel like all of this is creating a greater empathy between people and understanding and realization that we're all part of this complex system together.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. What do you think? Do you feel like it's created more intimacy since we're all looking at your house right now?
Do you remember the BBC interview where the guy was talking about North Korea, and then the two kids and the mom jumps in to close the door? This happened, I don't know, I think it may have been sometime last year, and it was a big thing in the world, right? It was a funny thing, but it became a big thing because for most of us, that back then, that was unacceptable, right? Like, how is it possible that you're not locking your door? Like, those are the assumptions that we had in mind. Now, today, when that happens, because it happens all the time, for us, it is like, oh, look at your cat running around. Hey, your kids, hey, baby, how are you doing? It's because we have become more human. I think this tragedy of coronavirus has humanized our relationships that were very robotic, if you will. Stefanie's my coworker, and hello, Stefanie, how are you doing? I hope you're good. See you later. But now we have become more human, and we gotta look into. I gotta look into your house. Well, now your school office. This is my studio in my apartment. So this is something that we didn't have before, and I think that's valuable, right? That to me is a human way to build inclusion.
I think I'm in total agreement. I also think, on top of that, every person has been affected by COVID, right? Like, I'll say I have always, since I had my daughter, I have an 8-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. Since I had my daughter, I've always had this amazing nanny. So I would say I haven't really had childcare issues. And I recognize that this is a huge challenge for a lot of people. You have unreliable childcare, or someone gets sick, or a kid can't go to school. But I've always been so lucky to have this amazing nanny who started working for us when she was in high school, and now she's like a nurse. But so we couldn't see her during COVID. And then I had the reality check of oh my gosh, this is really hard to figure out how to juggle. I have this 30-minute call, and then telling my partner, can you make sure the kids are, watched and fed for 30 minutes? I got to take this call. And so I think it also created more empathy, because it's sad to say we each have to feel a little pain in order to experience empathy, but I think it helps. We can relate more to other people because each of us are hurting in our own ways. Many people have family members who've been ill, and I think that creates connection and understanding because we're talking about these things. And I, as a leader, I'm very concerned about my mom who lives here in Boulder, and we don't want to get my mom sick, essentially. And even though we're pretty good social distancers, it's concerning. She's like
Yeah.
an at-risk group. And there's so many people I relate to on that who are like concerned about their own moms and dads and uncles and grandpas and stuff.
Yeah. This is I think this has been an equalizer in terms of emotions for a lot of people. And yes, we are in different places, and I don't mean to, I'm not oblivious to the fact that people have lost their jobs while they are taking care of sick family members, or they are sick themselves, and they have economic pressure or financial pressure because, well, they have to pay mortgage and the car loan, student loans, and whatnot. So, but in terms of feeling the pain that comes with all the pressures of what's happening, I think we have been, there has been, we are equalized, if you will, in a way where now you have to take care of your kids. You had a nanny before, and now you feel for those who had been taking care of their kids before coronavirus. So it's that added level of empathy. Of course, you were empathetic before, but it's that added layer of empathy that we're putting on top of all the things that are happening, because we're all going through the same situation in different ways, but the same situation. So
Yeah.
one question, Stefanie, that I want to ask you is, actually, before asking you the question, I want to once again welcome everybody who's here. Got a little trouble with the LinkedIn Live session. I sent the email again to everybody who had signed up. I hope they get the email on time to come to the Zoom link. But if you have any questions for Stefanie, please feel free to post them in the chat. You're all muted, and just to make sure that we keep it quiet. But if you have any questions, please post it in the chat. So Stefanie, the question that I was going to ask you is this: how can we bring that humanity to the workplace? How can we not lose the fact that we have become more human? And I ask you this question from a place of concern. I have interviewed a lot of people for the Hacking HR podcast that we're releasing soon. And my last question for all of them always is, what are you the most excited about the future, and what are you the most concerned about the future? And I think something like 90% of everybody that I've interviewed coincides that their main concern is that we go back to the old ways of doing things, that we don't take this situation and this opportunity, if you will, to deeply change and make that change sustainable. So how do we make this humanity something sustainable and bring it to the workplace whenever, if we ever go back to anything that resembled the way things were before?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that if you asked me that question, that would be my same answer, is that if we don't take any benefit away from this tragedy, then that's the worst tragedy of all, right? And so I feel like it's just really incumbent upon all of us to try to continue maintaining that humanity by having conversations. Like, I think it's as simple as a conversation. And now I think it's hard to, I say it's like when you see something, it's hard to unsee it. So you can't, I don't know that it's so easy to just go back when you've been Zooming with someone in front of their meowing cat for a year. But if we start to slip into our own ways, old ways, I think it's like all of us can do something to push us back into this space. Like, you don't have to be the manager, the leader. I think it's like any of us can continue interacting with our colleagues and bosses and subordinates and everyone in this way, where we're like, continue asking them questions. And like one of the things in the book that really struck me was there's the number of people who talked about going to work and feeling totally invisible. And that's like, to me, it's such a painful word, right? It's like no one sees you. They don't recognize your uniqueness, and you don't belong. Like, no one's chatting with you in the hallway, and no one is giving you the most exciting assignments. And it's like, when you do something well, people don't acknowledge it in the same way they do other people. So people talked about just invisibility. And I don't think we ever have to do that again, that go back, let people go back to feeling that way, because now, like, we all see each other in such vivid ways as we're sitting in our homes, that I think we can hang on to that. I mean, I feel it for my students at school. Like, students talk about feeling invisible and not being called on, and there's people who dominate the discussion. It's different. We've created a different space in Zoom world that people can contribute more equally and have like more of, I guess, a common experience. There's no chat in the hall, right? There's no water cooler because we're all at home.
Yeah, that's actually I know the word and I know the meaning. I just it's difficult to just acknowledge that you feel invisible at work, because, and this is not just because, well, maybe uh, your coworkers are not valuing you, but maybe your work is not acknowledged, or people take you for granted at work. And that invisibility comes in different in different colors and different ways in the workplace. And I think it's right now we are, even though we are separated from each other, that also has created an added sense or a different sense of how important it is to have human connections, right? So for those who may not have been invisible or felt invisible at work, they still need those human connections. And maybe the hope is that they are reaching out to everybody else in the organization, right? I think that's a powerful thing to change
Mhm.
in work. How else can we, based on your ideas and the book, how else can we inclusify?
Oh, yeah. So I think that what you've just summarized so eloquently, yes, we need to continue having empathy, make sure that everyone's seen. This is something we all have the power to do, right? To help people feel acknowledged. But then there's other things that are like ensuring that work is divided fairly.
Hmm.
So I think since we have, again, this is a COVID thing, but a new structure of organizing work, I think it has become even more apparent how unequally we divide good tasks and bad tasks, the
Yeah,
promotable tasks that, these are real opportunities and stretch assignments, and then the, edit my PowerPoint kind of task,
yeah,
or plan a party, or, those, I think office housework is usually what they're called, that's primarily placed upon the shoulders of women of color, honestly.
yeah.
And I feel like it seems more apparent to me, the way these things are divided, because there's more transparency, right, in what people are doing. But we can continue that by maintaining that transparency. And if it's keeping a Google Doc of who's doing what, so you can be sure that people are sharing in the bad stuff and also distributing the good stuff, I think that really helps. Just transparency in and of itself can create more belonging. And then I think there's a great opportunity to really publicly state your support for diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
And I think we all should be doing this. If you're not saying anything right now about diversity, then that silence says a million words. And so maybe in the book, some leaders said, I'm super passionate about diversity and inclusion. And then I would interview their subordinates or their team, and they're like, I don't know. I mean, he or she might be, but they never really say anything about diversity and inclusion. And like right now, it's like we have to talk about this. If you don't talk about diversity in this moment, it's like a huge oversight, and you're not supporting your team members. So I
What
think
what
that's something we can carry too.
Why do you think if this is a topic that is important to people, why wouldn't they talk about it? What do you think is preventing them from actually talking about it in the workplace, or
Yeah,
doing something about it for that matter?
I think people feel awkward, right? Like,
Mm,
if you are white in America, you've probably not spent a lot of time thinking about your race. And
yeah.
so I don't know if you know this, but I'm Latina. So my mom is Mexican. And so
Really?
I think I always talked about race.
Wow.
That's like, it's like our culture is different than other people's culture. And
Yeah.
we talked about it
I'm a
and we like
Latino
it.
too.
Yes, I know. But if you never talked about it, then it feels awkward. And I think people are super scared of, like, maybe it's cancel culture, that if I don't say anything, I'm not going to get sent to HR. But if I do say something and I say it wrong, I don't want it to be on, the Twitter sphere. I don't want people to call me out on it. And so I think that fear and then just lack of experience those are two reasons. The other reason is just like, you don't believe in equality.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this talking about it so important, that if it's like, I'm not talking about it because I'm scared, that's a different person than I'm not talking about it because I don't believe in equality. And your team doesn't know which one you are if you're not talking about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That is so important that you are mentioning that, because if we want to build a truly inclusive workplace where the marginalized groups find allies in everybody else who may be not marginalized, like probably in our case in America, white Americans, right?
Yeah.
We have to invite them to speak up fearlessly. Of course, that also implies, somebody asked me this question recently in a workshop that I was doing, and how do you start the conversation if you don't know how to start the conversation?
Yeah.
And I said, well, if you're coming from a place of genuineness and authenticity, you are curious, you can ask questions. People will forgive you if you ask a question that may feel a little weird or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
If you're coming from a place of true interest in knowing about others. Now, if you're coming from a place of asking the questions or saying something that is wrong, and everybody knows that you are not the kind of person who likes thinking about equality or diversity and inclusion, and you say something wrong, you might be judged, and rightfully so, right? So I like that you're bringing this topic to the table, because in this fight for belonging, inclusion, diversity, equality in the workplace, that fight is not the fight of just Black Americans or Latinos or Asians or any other minority. It is the fight of those groups with the allies that may not be marginalized as they are, or may not be discriminated against as they are, but they do need those. We all need those allies. So how can we inspire perhaps those allies to speak up? What can we do to make them feel that asking questions or talking about these things, even when they may make a mistake in the way they approach things, is still relevant and needed?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. There's a study done is a little while ago now, following the Me Too movement, that asked men why or why not are you an ally to women, and a lot of them reported, well, they don't know that the women want them as an ally. And so I think just like communicating this, like, here, I'm going to set the stage. We do want you as allies, everyone. So that you can't question whether people value that, especially because we know that diversity and inclusion initiatives are most effective when majority members, white men, are on board with it. So it's, yes, we want the support, and two, we need it, right? Because if we're going to make change, we need everyone to be on board, and everyone benefits from diversity and inclusion. When you look at stock prices, return on assets, like all revenue, every employee is benefiting from diversity and inclusion. So like every employee should be working to support diversity and inclusion. So I think just communication, telling people, like inviting them in. I've experienced this has a huge effect. You can, if you have an employee resource group, inviting your white male colleagues to attend. If you have like a event, a dialogue, a lot of ERGs are doing dialogues right now, an open discussion on race or intersectionality, and invite people who aren't normally in that ERG to come and listen, and then express to them like your gratitude for them being there and listening and being part of the conversation. Because otherwise we're just having conversations with ourselves all the time, and we're not really getting anywhere.
No, it's so interesting that you say that, because I think it was a couple of years ago on International Women's Day, I wanted to put together an event on International Women's Day, and I thought about only inviting women. And
you and all women.
I and all women. Yeah, I was going to be like moderating, and it's just going to be just women. My core organizer, who was a woman, she said, this is a mistake if you only invite women, because then the conversation will remain we're trying to convince the people that are already convinced of the changes that we need to make. We need to invite not only those who may not be convinced about these things, but we need to invite those who they may feel that, an easier connection with, right? And this also reminds me, I was in this racial justice conversation, and there was a white person speaking about inclusion, diversity, equity, racial injustice, and whatnot. And then there came a black person to talk about the same thing. And he said in the audience, to the audience, I am glad that the person that spoke before me was white, because if I had started the conversation myself being black, you would not believe me. And
Oh.
So that was mind blowing to me. And whether that's totally true or not, the reality is that when we find allies in groups that are different than ours, but they want to promote diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, I think we are way more powerful than if we just fight for for those rights just within our own groups. I think we are more effective by bringing diversity to the fight for diversity.
And I think you nailed, that's kind of the idea at Inclusify, is that we are better when we have different perspectives. And so that's equally true when it comes to being innovative around diversity and inclusion, or decision-making around, what are the actions we should be taking. Of course, you want other people's perspectives, right? If everyone shares the same perspective, you're not going to get the same creativity. So yeah. I think it's just that, unlike if you're deciding, a new product strategy, everyone feels fine to talk about that. But when it comes to diversity, I think it's so emotional that a lot of people don't come to the table. But man, the time is now. Like, you got to come now, or it's never going to happen, for sure.
Absolutely. And Stefanie, as we wrap up this conversation, and once again, I want to thank everybody who, I want to thank you, of course, because this has been an amazing conversation. And I want to thank everybody who connected online. I think we missed a few people by my little problem with LinkedIn Live. But as we wrap up the conversation, I do want to ask you, with all that is going on in the world, coronavirus, political divisiveness and polarization, social, economic, racial injustice, the Black Lives Matter movement, the Me Too movement, which continues to exist because, these problems seem to never end. What do you dream the future being like? If it was up to you to design that future and you had a magic wand to say, this is how things are going to be, what does the future look like?
Yeah, I think about that all the time because of those two little kids I mentioned. And yeah. It is a world where every aspect of society and business looks as diverse as our country is. And, where people feel free to be themselves every day and their best selves. Like, maybe there's some stuff you don't need to bring to work, but where race and gender, it's not that it's gone, right? Like, this is still an important part of our identity, but that it doesn't hold people back.
Yeah, I like that world. And I hope for it, right? And I hope it actually, comes to reality where, not only in work, but in general, I just think about all the things that are happening in our country now. I guess we have a diverse community participating in this conversation, but, in America, you get people, religious groups hating each other or political groups hating each other. And you're just like, when we are sitting together in a coffee shop, we are just humans, right? I mean, we are like, if we didn't say, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, I'm black, race, of course we know that, but, I'm a straight or I'm a gay or I'm Christian or I'm a Muslim, we wouldn't know about those things unless we say so. And when we don't talk about that, we are so close to each other that the moment we say, oh, you are, a Republican, I'm a Democrat, all right, no, we can't talk anymore. Or, oh, you are a Muslim, I'm a Christian, forget it, I don't want to talk to you anymore. So I just don't understand why we make those, sometimes, unfortunately, and ridiculous divisions among us instead of, just being together, right?
Yeah, we all think our own way is the only way. And if it were, there would only be one way, right? So
and it would be very boring.
Boring.
It would be a very boring world. I tell all my friends who have a different political view than I have, I tell them, I'm a liberal, and I say, we need conservatives to keep us accountable, and conservatives need liberals to keep them accountable. One day you're in government, the other day the other one is in government. But it's only with high-level political discourse and debate that we keep each other online doing the best thing. We are going to disagree, and that's okay. But if we were all thinking the same thing, man, that would be very boring.
Yes.
I don't want to be in a world where everybody was the same, thinking the same, looking the same. I mean, what sense, what fun would there be in that, right?
Exactly. Some days you need to have poofy hair. That's like
Absolutely, yeah. And some days it's just your hair. That's a reality. So anyway, Stephanie, this was a beautiful conversation, fantastic conversation. I'm glad that you shared your insights with us. Everybody who's connected here, please. I can see that Mariela is sharing a Facebook Inclusify community in there. Please join that community. Stefanie's website is posted online as well as also the book. So please get in touch with her. You see now how awesome and talented and all these amazing insights about the work that Stefanie has done. And please stay connected. Let's continue to make a better world and a more inclusive and loving and tolerant world, if you will.
Absolutely. Thank you so
All
much
right.
for having me.
Thank you, Stefanie. Sorry about the LinkedIn Live little thing. And I was very happy to be in this conversation with you. Thank you, everybody. Please continue to stay safe and well and strong. We're going to get out of this, and hopefully we're going to have a better world after it. So thank you, and you all have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.